Alright guys, in this video we're going to start to get into object-oriented programming in JavaScript. And a couple of the most important things in object-oriented programming in just about any language is the constructor and the this keywords. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now we will be going over ES6 classes and constructors later, but I think it's important to learn how it works under the hood with ES5. ES6 classes are basically syntactic sugar, or kind of a convenient syntax, which gives you an easier way to write object-oriented code, similar to Java, C#, PHP, any language that has classes. But we want to learn how it works underneath as well. You don't want to just learn the ES6 classes way. All right, now we've already looked at object literals, so we could say like const, let's give it a variable of a name, we'll say Brad, set it to a set of curly braces, and we can say name Brad, and it's basically just key value pairs, right? So we can say age, and they can be different types, they can be strings, numbers, dates, whatever. And then we can console.log Brad, and we get that object. All right, and of course we can console log Brad.age and stuff like that. So that's an object literal, and that's fine for a lot of cases when you want to deal with just one object or one instance. But if you want to create multiple instances of a certain type of object, then you're going to want to create a constructor. And if you're going to want to get into prototypes and inheritance and all that kind of stuff, then you want to learn about constructors. So let's go ahead and create a constructor method or function. So we'll say person constructor, and we're just going to define a function, call it person, and constructors should start with a capital. And then in here, let's say this dot name equals Brad. All right, so this is a constructor, and it has one property called name. Now, just doing this, just these couple lines of code here, this one function, which actually is one line of code, we can instantiate a person object from this. Okay, now to instantiate an object, we use the new keyword. So let's create a variable, we'll call it Brad. And instead of setting it to a literal with just some curly braces, we're going to say new person, like that. Okay, and then we'll go down here and we'll console.log Brad. Okay, and now you can see that we just have an object with a name with a string of Brad. Now notice that before it we have the actual object name, which is person. Now we can create as many people or persons as we want. So if we wanted to create another one called John and console log John, then we're going to get a person. Now notice that John's name is also Brad because we hard coded it up here with this dot name. Now obviously this isn't going to work. This isn't what we're going to want to do. John should have a different name. So what we would do is we would take in an argument of name, and then we would just set this dot name equal to name. That way when we create a new person, we can construct it with a name. So we'll say Brad, and for this one we'll say John. And now if we save and run console log John, it gives us his name. If we say Brad, we get Brad's name. Okay, and we can create as many people as we want now. Now the this keyword is very important, and what this does is it refers to the current instance of the object. All right, so just know in this case it pertains to the person. It pertains to this function scope. Now we can also use this outside of a function. So let's see what that gives us. If we say console, well actually let's do it in here first. So if we say console.log this, okay, now it should log twice because we instantiated two objects. All right, so down here, actually let's get rid of the console log. Save, and now just by instantiating it, we're console logging this, and that gives us the current person, the current instance, I should say. All right, now you can use this outside of the function scope and the global scope. Okay, and what do you think this is going to give us? If we say console log this, do you think we're going to get an error? Let's save it and see. And no, we get the window object. Okay, when you use this inside of the global scope, which means not inside of a function, we're going to get the window object. And we could actually do something like this dot alert, because we know alert is part of the window object. So if you say alert 1 and save, that's actually going to execute. All right, so just know that when this is in the global scope, it pertains to the window object. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. Now we can add other properties as well. So for instance, age, and we could set this dot age equals to age, and then we could pass in, let's say 36. For John, we'll say 30, and of course we could do like console.log John.age and get 30. Okay, so this is pretty simple. Now I want to change this up a little bit. Let's see, let's just comment this stuff out, and then I want to, instead of using an age property, I want to use a birthday property. So we'll say this dot birthday equals, and then we're going to have, when we instantiate an object, we want to pass in a date of birth. Now this is going to be passed in as a string. We want it to be a date, so we're going to say this dot birthday equals new date, and then pass in that DOB string. Now notice that the date object, which is a core object of JavaScript, also has a constructor we're calling new date. Just like down here we're calling new person, except person is an object that we created. Okay, that's a constructor that we created. This is a core object that uses a constructor. And there's even objects for things like strings and other primitive values, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. A lot of it doesn't make sense and you would never use it, but it is there. Now if we were to go down here and say const Brad equals a new person, and we'll pass in the name and we'll pass in the date of birth as a string. So we'll say 9-10-1981. And if you watch the date and time lecture that I did, you know that you can use all different types of formats. I could do slash, I could do September 10th, I could do all kinds of formatting, and the date will understand it. But let's go ahead and console.log Brad, and you can see that we have the name, and then we also have the birthday, which is the date. It even gives us the day of the week. Okay. Now what I want to do is create a method on this in this constructor. Okay, a method is a function that's inside of an object. So let's go ahead and say this dot, and I'm going to call this get age. All right, we want to set that equal to a function, and then obviously what I want this to do is calculate the age from the birthday. Okay, actually let's call it calculate age. Now there's a lot of ways that you can do this. What I'm going to do is subtract. First of all, I'm going to subtract the get time method of the birthday from today's date. So let's say const, and I'll call this variable diff for difference, and we'll set date dot now, which is going to give us right now's timestamp, date and time, and then we're going to subtract this. Okay, remember we can use this to access any properties and methods within person. So we want to access birthday, so this dot birthday, and then I'm going to use the get time method. All right, and then what we want to do is create another variable. I'm going to call it age date, and we're going to create a date from that diff value. So we'll say new, use the date constructor, so new date, and we'll pass in diff. Okay, and then the last line we want to do is we want to return that age date, and then we want to call a method called get UTC full year. All right, so we want to call that method, which gives us the year in the specified date according to the universal time. And then from there, we just want to subtract from it 1970. All right, so this may look a little confusing, but this is just a common formula to calculate an age from a birthday. Now, I just want to wrap this in math.abs for absolute, just to make sure it's an absolute number. All right. Now, math is one of the objects that you actually don't have to use the new keyword. Okay, you can just say math dot and then whatever method you want to use. So this should calculate the age. So let's test it out by going down here and saying console log brad dot calculate age. Okay, it's a function, so we have to put on our curly braces and save, and you can see we get 36. All right, if I were to change this to 1980 and save, we'll get 37. So that's working. Now, I could have did something easier here, like, I don't know, I could have did first and last name properties and then just get full name and simply return the first and last name. But I wanted to make it a bit more advanced because as we move along, I want things to get a little bit harder. But the point of doing this is just to have a method within the constructor. All right, so you can see that we can use constructors to easily create object instances so that we can create as many objects as we want. And in this case, they'll all have a name, a birthday, and they'll all have this calculate age function associated with them. Okay, so we'll be looking more into constructors as we move along, but this is the basics of how they work in a core ES5 context.